Well, welcome back to episode 4 of Opera InSight 2021, Eugene Onegin. So, picture this. It's the night of the opera. You enter Santa Fe's beautiful open-air theater. You anticipate 2 hours of exquisite romantic music of Tchaikovsky, conducted expertly by Nicholas Carter. So, where will the music take us? And what can it teach us about love? The opera is peppered with lessons about love. Well, 10 of them to be exact, and I'm going to point out each one along the way. But even before the first words of the libretto are sung, we have entered the theater, and imagine this: the large stage-filled room of a Russian country house, and in the distance, the family manor house, like a childhood memory of the ancestral home. Then the overture starts, and as the first theme emerges, the lush score draws us into the nostalgic scene. You'll notice trees around the house, some of which cast shadows, appearing almost as if they're in the house. This staging reminds us that love itself blends what's inside our hearts and soul with what's outside in the social surroundings and family. Central to this production is just such an understanding about what goes on within us and around us. This brings us to love lesson number 1. Love blends your internal emotions with your external circumstances. The engaging music speaks to each of us as we live our life, remembering our past and anticipating our future. Our very insightful director, Alessandro Talevi, taps into this sense of opera, which infuses it with its emotional power, its magnetic pull on each of us to re-experience the feelings of our pasts, both real and imagined. Talevi once wryly commented to me that he's not the first director to see this connection between Eugene Onegin and nostalgia. Just Google search it and you'll see. Well, I did just that, and I got over 151,000 hits in 0.73 seconds. I kid you not. Nostalgic childhood longings comprise some of our most compelling feelings. Now, maybe they're not the twin sisters of love, but they definitely are intimate members of the same family. In this context, we are reminded of love lesson number 2. Love always exists in the present, accompanied by a remembered past and an anticipated future. I repeat, love always exists in a present, accompanied by a remembered past and an anticipated future. Engaging this reality creates an ambiguous ambience in this Santa Fe opera's production of Eugene Onegin, one in which the present includes an elusive sense of nostalgic memory and wistful dreams. Watch how in this production, Tatyana's dreams come alive, and the ambiguous way in which her dreamscape merges with the realities of imagined love relationships. The ingenious use of staging and costumes designed by Gary McCain and the lighting designed by Matt Haskin involve a sense of memory and reverie as a context for its reality. Although it certainly can be viewed as a series of scenes in a linear passage of time, at our very core, we can sense there's more to it than that. The music vibrates within us to the times of our past, in our own lives and in our own loves. The climactic end of the opera culminates with Onegin regretful about his past, anticipating a destined love with Tatyana, begging her to leave her adoring husband and a life of luxury and to embrace her powerful romantic adolescent passions for him. Any one of us, by which I mean every one of us, has experienced the desolation of unrequited love. And at that climactic moment, whether or not we sympathize with him or feel Onegin's suffering, how will Tatyana respond? Will passion win the day, or will she gain a new perspective on her adolescent longing and choose an adult life and love? Spoiler alert, before we're finished, I'm going to tell you, in all likelihood, Tchaikovsky recognized the scene. What do I mean by that? He recognized the setting of Pushkin's story in the summer house of wealthy Russians because both he and Pushkin, the author of the original novel written in verse, and Tchaikovsky, the composer of the opera, were raised in such aristocratic Russian families. Undertaking the mission of converting one of the most celebrated novels in all Russian literature and poetry would be daunting and nearly overwhelming. And yet, Tchaikovsky was said to recognize the lyric quality of the scenes and compose a score representing the emotionality of the story. He composed this score in only 8 months back in 1878 and 9, and he did it even though he himself was in a heartbreak episode of his own life where an ill-conceived marriage and subsequent divorce were taking place. Tchaikovsky transformed his pain into art, and this opera, Eugene Onegin. In the opening scene, the widowed mother and landowner, Larina, is at the table with her old retainer, Filipnieva. In most productions, they're canning jam, but in ours, they'll be painting a set of matryoshka dolls. Those are those nesting dolls where each one contains the next one in size. They are synonymous with Russian culture. The slight change of props at the director's discretion indicates a slightly different focus for the opera. The opera dolls symbolize this new approach. They simultaneously represent the little girl inside the maturing woman, or, in the other direction, the woman that still has the little girl inside her. This is an opera about just such transformation inside Tatyana. Also, the largest of these dolls sometimes is said to represent Mother Russia itself and how much Russian culture surrounds the life of its people. This cultural ambience affects everything in the opera, from the harvest songs in Act 1 through the deadly duel of Act 2, all the way to Tatyana's newly elevated social status, clarified in Act 3. No, of course, you're not supposed to be thinking any of that because of a slight change in props. Rather, it's all part of an atmosphere that the stage direction supports. It's been said that a well-directed opera is never even noticed. It's almost as if the flow of the opera is so seamless, the singers could need no direction at all. People only notice directors' work when it's done badly enough to distract you from the immersion in the music and the story, and this time that's not going to happen. Let's look at several other details of the opening scene that influence the experience of this production. The opening exchanges establish romantic, fantasy-prone, bookish characters of Tatyana, as well as the fun-loving character of her sister Olga. And soon, folk singing and dancing peasants arrive to mark the end of the harvest. Olga joins in the merriment, while Tatyana remarks that the peasant songs make her dream and float away. Are we witnessing the memory of her childhood home as Tatyana looks back on it? Or are we seeing Tatyana's life as she experiences it unfolding? She is remembering at that moment, perhaps, the torment of lovers from her novels. She's not only talking to her mother, she's actually talking to us as well. You see, this day is the first well-remembered meeting between Tatyana and Onegin. She projected on him all of her romantic fantasies. He finds her alluring, but dull and rustic as the surroundings. He asks her, "Tell me, is it not so dreadfully boring for you here in the depths of the country? I don't suppose you get much amusement." Here's again where the director's choice affects how we feel about him. Does Onegin sing these lines as detached chit-chat, or is he really trying to connect there? In Pushkin's original story, Onegin, the title character, is a dandy and a cad, taken right out of the lines from Pushkin. Onegin talks about waiting for his rich uncle to die. He sings, "My God, what a bore. I was sitting there by an invalid day and night." Of course, Onegin in the novel didn't have the advantage of speaking his lines to Tchaikovsky's incredibly romantic music. In the opera, we are establishing his character here that sets up the basis for his reaction in scene 3. More on that in a minute. Meanwhile, Lenski, Onegin's friend, declares his love for Olga. Now, leaving aside the beauty of his aria, which is indeed beautiful, his I love you seems to be limited in its vision of Olga as an inevitable girlfriend next door life partner. Whereas, while enjoying it, Olga does not take him as seriously as he is taking himself. She jokes, "We grew up together. Do you remember how our parents destined us, even as children, for each other?" As we soon see, getting caught up in his own fantasy gets him killed in a duel in Act 2. Does he die from love or for being so out of touch with what love really means? This brings us to love lesson number 3. Love inspires us to know another person so well that we care for that person as much as we care for ourselves, maybe more. And Lenski simply does not. In the next scene, the literally lovesick Tatyana spends all night writing and rewriting a love letter to Onegin, telling him that, well, remember the Matryoshka dolls? This is a glimpse of the adolescent who will become the woman in Act 3. Or conversely, what that woman recalls looking back on herself as an adolescent. In either case, we're getting a clear picture of what the projective and painful longings of immature love feels like. And you guessed it, this brings us to love lesson number 4. Initial passionate love, as described by Elaine Hatfield, is the combination of intense emotional, sexual attraction, anxiety, and affection. It is a state of intense longings for a union with another. Ecstasy, if your love is reciprocated, and despair, if your love is rejected. You have a heightened sense of emotionality and vulnerability. Now, in the next scene, Onegin regrets he cannot reciprocate her love. And here in the opera is where the directorial discretion shapes our perception of Onegin's character. He can sing to her, perhaps dismissing her as a silly child, or perhaps truly expressing feelings for her innocent ardor. This scene, more than any other perhaps, sets us up for our reaction to the end of the opera. Will he be the cad who gets what he deserves, or someone who merits our sympathy because he realized his love too late? Perhaps both, and you can ponder this on the way home. Now, let's return to the opera. In Act 2, Scene 1, there's a party and it leads to a deadly duel. Lenski mistakes his intense feelings for love as other kinds of feelings, and a possessive jealousy of Olga. As we saw with Figaro, love is undermined by jealousy, and the result can be disastrous. This is a somewhat obvious but ubiquitous love lesson, lesson number 5. Love is undermined by possessive jealousy. Well, in this case, Onegin, bored in the country, gets back at Lenski for having brought him to this party. And in Onegin's opinion, this banal party entitles him to flirt with Olga, who, as you know, the object of Lenski's romantic projections. Olga recognizes her childhood friend's jealousy as ridiculous and teases him about it and accepts Onegin's frequent offers to dance. Lenski goes on to insult Onegin, demand satisfaction. Onegin is reluctant, but he eventually agrees. Lenski had a lot to learn about love, and he should have come to this pre-opera talk and learned it, because in lesson number 6, love is not something you possess. It is a process in relation to another in a constant state of adjustment. And if you make these adjustments, your love not only grows and deepens, but it can last a lifetime. Otherwise, it withers. Or, if you're in an opera, you might just end up getting shot dead in a duel. Lenski, despite all of his faults, has a gorgeous tenor voice and sings a real show-stopping aria about the loss of the golden days of his youth. And then, in true adolescent fashion, wonders about Olga coming to his grave and shedding tears. As a psychiatrist, I can confirm that adolescents who become suicidal often imagine their own funerals with some satisfaction, imagining the remorse and sorrow of their parents or their love interests. And now that they're gone and suicided. And I recognize clearly this suicidal dynamic in Lenski. Also, This was not a traditional duel. Here's something I wondered about. Did the original audiences in 1870 know about traditional dueling? And if so, they would have recognized where this one went astray. Lenski's second, Zaretsky, claims he knows, quote, the strict rules of the art, following the old tradition. And how shall I put it? He was wrong. In an old school traditional duel, at that time, if your opponent is even 15 minutes late, you can declare yourself the winner and go home, even though the opera makes the point that Onegin is considerably late. In fact, so late that Lenski has time to sing that gorgeous aria. Lenski doesn't leave. Next, your second. In this case, Zaretsky is supposed to try to convince your opponent to apologize and stop the duel. In this case, he does not. Next, as the person challenged, in this case Onegin, you're allowed to shoot first at the sky or the ground, doing whatever you want to do so the aggrieved party can do the same and have his honor restored. But Onegin merely takes casual aim, and when he shoots, guess what? He shoots Lenski dead. Accidentally? Who knows? But that again is at the discretion of the director. The more accidental it seems, the more sympathetic Onegin becomes when he is haunted by the ghost of his friend. If he did it on purpose, it seems shallow. Well, enough of dueling digression. In the opera, what happens after that? Years have passed, and maybe you've had an intermission, which was also passed. And in any case, we're on to Act 3. In the first scene, Onegin arrives at a party and asserts, I'm bored here. Sound familiar? Apparently, he hasn't changed a bit. This is exactly what he said in Act 1. He explains, I'm 26, wearied by the idleness of leisure, without employment, wife, or occupation. And who should be at this party? None other than Tatyana, who looks like royalty, married to a famous elderly retired general, Prince Gremin, who not only loves her, but knows her and appreciates her, like a star in the night firmament amidst the dark sky of sycophants and liars. That's Gremlin's words. Finally, a romantic hero worthy of Tchaikovsky's music. He has the genuine love for Tatyana. And so, here's love lesson number 6. Love is a process, not something you can possess, that grows and deepens with time if loving partners are willing to make needed adjustments. And clearly, this prince has been willing to do so, which leads directly to love lesson number 7. Genuine, mature love includes adoration, understanding, and appreciation. The prince introduces Onegin to Tatyana, but of course they say they knew each other, having met as neighbors in the countryside. Here, the music tells the story. The musical fear theme from Act 1 reprises for Tatyana, but with much, much less intensity. And for Onegin, the music plays an echo of the melody that accompanied her love for him in the letter, and now the shoe's on the other foot. And on to another opera insight about love. Love lesson number 8. Love is a 2-step process. We humans activate powerful emotions like love in these 2 steps. First, the body responds as your heartbeat accelerates. Along with your breathing, your mouth gets dry, your hands may shake. And then second, your mind labels the emotion as love, anger, fear, depending on the context and perceived cause. Opera understood this long before the science of psychology was even invented. Seeing Onegin, no doubt, activated Tatyana, the object of such powerful fantasy, the first love, the killer of a childhood friend. And she wants closure, so she agrees to meet him. In the opera's final scene, Tatyana has a letter from Onegin declaring his love. Of course she's unsettled. The reason? Onegin has appeared to her like a relentless apparition, the proverbial ghost from the past. She says it reawakened my dormant past so that I felt like a young girl again. This is her first cognitive labeling. It brings us to another psychological concept. This is sort of the working definition of neurotic feelings. Neuroticism, without getting too technical, can be like living in the present as if past conditions still existed. Often we think of this as childhood influences, but certainly it can have its roots in adolescence as well. This is true for Tatyana. She says it straight out. I feel like a young girl again. And this brings the entire arc of the opera into focus with the powerful theme of nostalgic longings for the past. So, evident in Pushkin's novel and in Tchaikovsky's music as well. I might want to just interject something here. Notice how the traditional arc of drama is included in this opera when there is a certain break of equilibrium when she meets Onegin in Act 1. There's chaos, including a deadly duel in Act 2, and now we are at the conclusion in Act 3. What will restore equilibrium here? Because the meeting between Onegin and Tatyana is happening here at the end of the opera. Onegin bursts in pleading, admitting he was mistaken, and makes declarations of devotion and love. He believes now he truly loves her. Just like Lenski, he believes what he feels is love, even if it's far from relational truth. Which brings us to love lesson number 9. Don't just believe what you feel, believe in the relationship's truth. Tatyana begins to give in, but then she pulls back. She's chosen to be with another, and she poignantly sings, with him I will live and never leave him. She does express the power of passion. She does acknowledge that although he hurt her, he did act honorably and not take advantage of her. But she counters her own argument. You didn't find me attractive then, why now? Why do you pursue me? Why am I the object of such attention? Could it be because now I frequent the highest circles? Because I'm rich and I'm of the nobility? Because my husband wounded in battle enjoys on that account the favor of the court? She rightly suspects that his attraction exists in an abstract desire that really has nothing to do with her personally, and yet she has trouble dismissing him out of hand. How can we explain this? This circumstance illustrates the 2 points of how we work as people. The first is straightforward. We humans are much better distinguishing honesty than we are in recognizing truth. Onegin here is honest about his admission of his mistake and his belief in his feelings of love. We feel it, we hear it in his voice, and more importantly, we definitely hear it in the music. His suffering is real because he himself believes his own story, and yet this love is far from the truth, which brings us to the second point. Onegin illustrates the nature of emotional ambivalence. It's sometimes expressed as approach avoidance. In practical terms, here's how it plays out. Any authentic attempt at closeness would be followed by backing away. Conversely, the distance and surety that his approach will be unsuccessful, the more likely is he to pursue it. The more certain in his soul that Tatyana is unavailable, the more he can plead with her to give up everything, like Anna Karenina gave up for Count Vronsky. Tatyana would have to abandon her loving husband, a decorated war hero, her family, her social position at court as a favorite of the Tsar. And believe me, after all we know about Onegin, that if she did ruin herself and run away for what he called love, he would ultimately flee from her love, as surely as he rejected her before. And you know where that leads? A place that's no good. It didn't work out well for Anna Karenina. Tatyana, adored by her beloved, that she in turn loves, is no Anna Karenina. She cognitively reframes her decision. She sees her activation as an expression of powerful feelings from her past that she no longer has to harbor. She has learned what Onegin will never learn, the relational nature of love as a choice. And this ultimately brings us to the final love lesson number 10 from the opera. Love is indeed a choice, one that we make every day. And Tatyana makes her choice. She's moved on. Her last line to Onegin says it simply, goodbye forever. The lights go out on Onegin. And it's up to you and only you to decide. Did the cad get what he deserved, or did he finally and tragically encounter his true love, lost to him forever? And I ask you, what journey do you think you will make during this opera through the lost and found of your own life's loves? The success of this type of drama requires a cast whose acting ability is up to their singing ability, and a cast that brings a special kind of chemistry that allows Tchaikovsky's music to come to life. The title role is sung by Etienne Dupuis, making his Santa Fe debut. Born in Montreal, this internationally acclaimed bass baritone first sang the role of Eugene Onegin in 2015. Now for Etienne, as he put it, Onegin is not just a bastard. He might be inept, but he's not devoid of good intentions. He brings depth and richness to the role. He is partnered with the Australian soprano Nicole Carr. She is also making her Santa Fe debut as Tatyana, although she has been singing this role for many years. In 3 of those performances, it was actually with Etienne. Their chemistry on stage is incredible. The probable reason for that is they have that same chemistry offstage as a couple. Now, Avery Amaro, a contralto, sings the role of Olga, Tatyana's sister. One gramophone review said her burnt umber voice, smoothly produced, never forced, or a pleasure in themselves. She brings each role an abundant musical intelligence and a specific sense of character. And Bazo James Creswell sings the role of Prince Gremin, Tatyana's Act 4 husband. You probably remember him from my talk on The Marriage of Figaro, in which he portrays Antonio this season. Both are making their Santa Fe opera debuts this summer. Another singer making his Santa Fe debut is Doviet Nergeldiev, the tenor singing the role of Lenski. 2 mezzo-sopranos, Michaela Martins and Deborah Nanstill, round out the main singers at the opera. We remember them from the 2015 season. Martins from her role in Salome, and Nanstill from her part in Cold Mountain. One final word about Tchaikovsky. Although he may be more famous for his ballet scores like Swan Lake, he was an accomplished composer of operas. He wrote 10 of them. That's more than Bizet. That's the same number as Bellini and Puccini. Eugene Onegin is probably the most beloved of Tchaikovsky's operas. And with so many lessons about love, how could we resist it? If you're familiar with this opera, you already know the reason we love it. And if you're about to experience it for the first time, you are in for a treat. So, see you next week at our 5th and final episode, A Midsummer Night's Dream. Thank you. See you then.